Dead America, Tales from Las Vegas, The First Rescue Mission, by Derek Slayton. Chapter 1. Captain Foster jolted awake as a loud clattering sound came from the main office portion of the massive warehouse. The noise echoed through the building, sharp and metallic. He sat up from behind the desk in the small side office, his blanket still draped over him like a cocoon. The air mattress beneath him squeaked as he fumbled about for a moment, disoriented, before getting his feet over to solid ground. Foster pulled himself up, stretching his sore muscles and popping his joints. His back protested the movement, stiff from sleeping on the makeshift bed. As he worked the kinks out, he looked through the windows to the main office area, seeing sunlight pouring in from the front. Bright, warm rays cut through the space, illuminating dust motes floating in the air. "What the hell? How long was I out?" Foster muttered. He looked down at his watch, squinting at the hands until his eyes fully focused. Nearly noon. The realization hit him like cold water. "Jesus, I did not want to sleep that long," Foster said. He shook his head, rubbing his eyes for a moment to get the sleep fully out of them. His fingers pressed against his eyelids until he saw spots. Once relatively composed, he ran a hand through his hair and walked to the door of his small office. Foster pulled it open and stepped out into the main area where the rest of the men were working. The office had been transformed while he slept. Supplies were organized, equipment laid out in neat rows. The bodies that had littered the space yesterday were gone, dragged outside, or moved somewhere he couldn't see. The blood remained, though, dark stains on the carpet that would never come out. "Morning, Cap. Did you get some good sleep?" Sullivan asked from across the room. The corporal was sitting at a desk, still working on the laptop from last night. Papers were spread around him, what looked like printed inventory lists. "Yeah, Sullivan. A little too much, actually. Why the hell didn't you guys wake me up?" Foster asked. Sullivan looked up from his work, a slight smile crossing his face. "Because we got everything under control out here," Sullivan said. He motioned towards the front doors of the building, where Parker, Thomas, and Cooper were putting the finishing touches on a barricade made from a collection of wooden pallets. The structure was crude but effective looking, stacked and secured with metal straps and fasteners. The privates worked with the easy efficiency of men who'd done manual labor before, their movements coordinated. "Hey, sorry about that crash, Captain. The bottom fell out of the box of metal fasteners I was carrying," Parker said, looking over his shoulder. The private was still wearing the same blood-stained uniform from last night. He'd cleaned his face and hands, but the rest of him looked like he'd walked through a slaughterhouse. Foster made a mental note to get the man some fresh clothes. "You're good, Parker. I needed to get up anyway," Foster said. "We got a pot of coffee brewed in the break room there," Cooper offered, pointing to a door on the far wall. "Thanks, Cooper. How old is it?" Foster asked. His mouth was already watering at the thought. Real coffee, hot and strong, not the instant crap they'd been drinking in the field. "Can't be more than half an hour, but if you want fresher, we have a warehouse full of the stuff," Thomas said. Foster nodded and gave the privates a thumbs up as he walked towards the break room. His boots were still on, laced tight from when he'd collapsed into bed. He'd been too exhausted to even remove them. He stepped into the break room, immediately hit with the aroma of the coffee. The smell was rich and dark, filling his nostrils and perking him up before he'd even poured a cup. The break room was small but functional. A couple of tables, some chairs, a microwave that probably didn't work anymore. Vending machines lined one wall, their contents still visible through the glass. The coffee maker sat on a counter, a full pot waiting. Foster grabbed a mug from the rack, one that said, "World's Best Employee" in faded letters, and poured himself a generous amount. With a splash of cream from a container they'd pulled from the cold storage mixing with the dark liquid gold, he was good to go. The sounds of hammering and drilling filled the office as he savored his cup for a moment. The coffee was strong, almost bitter, exactly what he needed. He took another long drink before returning to the main area. "Has anybody seen Hanson lately?" Foster asked. "He's out front getting the barricade set up," Parker said, not looking up from his work. "You're letting him set it up by himself?" Foster asked. The rest of the soldiers let out a laugh before Sullivan responded. "Well, it's not actually much of a barricade. You'll see," Sullivan said. Foster raised his cup to Sullivan in acknowledgement before walking over to the barricade near the front door. The pallets were set up in a semicircle, extending 6 feet away from the front doors. which would serve to trap zombies in it should the defenses be breached. It was smart thinking, creating a kill zone. The pallets had gaps between them, wide enough to shoot through but narrow enough to prevent the creatures from squeezing past. Cooper pulled open the pallet at the right side of the line, which was attached to a hinge. The makeshift door swung smoothly, allowing Foster to walk through. The captain continued sipping his coffee as he stepped outside into the warm sun. Foster scanned the area, looking for Hansen before spotting him on a ladder near the front gate. The entirety of the gate was covered in a blue tarp that had been attached to the top. The covering stretched out 20 yards in either direction, blocking the view from the street. Hansen was struggling to secure the start of the next tarp, his arms stretched overhead as he tried to get it to catch. Foster continued enjoying his coffee as he walked over, his boots crunching on the asphalt. The sergeant was none the wiser to his presence as he was focused on his work, muttering curses to himself under his breath. The captain tried to stifle a laugh at the sight of his normally composed sergeant wrestling with a tarp, but it was loud enough for Hansen to hear and turn around. "You know, Cap, instead of laughing, you could give me a hand," Hansen said. "You seem to have it under control, Hansen. Besides, this is your punishment for letting me sleep in," Foster said, taking another drink. "I know you aren't accustomed to gratitude, Foster, but usually you're supposed to thank someone for letting you sleep in," Hansen replied. Both men let out a laugh before Hansen tossed the tarp to the ground in frustration. It landed with a soft thump, the blue material pooling at the base of the ladder. "The other ones went right over the top, no problem. I don't know why this one is being an asshole," Hansen said, climbing down. "It's all good, Sarge. Take a break and maybe tell me what you're doing," Foster asked. Hansen climbed down off the ladder, which was positioned just a few feet away from a handful of zombies that were pressed up against the chain-link fence. The ghouls gnashed their teeth and moaned excitedly at the presence of fresh meat, their dead eyes tracking his movements. But they were agitated that they couldn't reach him, their fingers curling through the chain link and shaking it. The fence rattled but held firm. "Well, Cap, I figured that the fence is going to provide us some protection, but if enough of those things got in one spot, it might fail. So I figured I'd hang these up so we'd be out of sight," Hansen explained, gesturing to the tarps. "Out of sight, out of mind," Foster said, nodding his approval. "That's my thinking," Hansen agreed. "I like it. Once we get a few more people in here, we'll put them on that," Foster said. "Are you ready to head out?" Hansen asked. "As soon as we call Mike and figure out where we're going," Foster replied. Hansen nodded, reaching into his pocket and pulling out the phone. He handed it over, the screen showing a full charge. "I wondered where that was," Foster said, taking it. "I saw it was charged when I woke up, and there was a message from Diesel. I gave him a call and let him know that we're safe," Hansen said. "I appreciate that, Hansen," Foster said. He pulled up the contacts list, clicking on the radio station button. The phone rang a few times, each tone seeming to stretch out longer than the last. Finally, Mike picked up. "You got Midnight Mike, live and in person," Mike said, his radio voice in full effect. "Good morning to you too, Mike. You may be running out of food, but it sounds like the coffee supply is solid," Foster said. "Captain Foster, good to hear your voice. What can I do for you this fine morning?" Mike asked, his tone shifting slightly away from the radio persona. "Well, my boys and I are well rested, and we're ready to head out and start helping people. I figured you'd be the man to talk to," Foster said. "Excellent," Mike said. There was a pause, and Foster could hear papers rustling on the other end of the line. Mike was checking his notes, his database of survivors. "So, the closest group is going to be Asher over at Asher's gym. It's not too far from where you are, and in a strip mall," Mike said. "How many people are we looking at?" Foster asked. "There's 8 of them in there, however. There's a bit of a complication," Mike replied. Foster took another drink of his coffee, which was starting to cool. Of course there was a complication. Nothing was ever simple anymore. "I wouldn't have it any other way, Mike." "What are we walking into?" Foster asked. "Nothing too major. It's just that Asher is pretty sure he broke his ankle," Mike explained. "Of course he did." "How did he manage that?" Foster asked. "Saving 2 people from the parking lot. He fought off 3 of those things with a plate weight," Mike said. Foster had to respect that. Civilians fighting back with whatever they had, that took guts. A plate weight wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than bare hands. "All right, I'm not mad at it. Do me a favor, Text me his number and tell him I'll give him a call when we're on site and know how we're going to pull this off," Foster said. "You got it, Captain. Let me know when you have that done, because I have a few more people in the area who could really use your help," Mike said. "How many people are we talking, Mike?" Foster asked, his brow furrowing. "Just a handful, that's all. I haven't even told them that help is an option. I've just been putting together a database of survivors, what they have and where they are," Mike explained. "What would we do without you, Mike?" Foster asked. "I'm hoping you get some food up to me in the next few days so you don't have to find out," Mike replied. Both men let out a laugh before Foster continued. "We're going to take care of you, don't worry." "I'll be in touch," Foster said. "Be safe out there, Captain," Mike said. Foster clicked the phone off and pocketed it. A moment later, it vibrated against his leg, Asher's phone number coming through in a text message. He pulled it back out, checking the number before putting it away again. "Are we ready to do this, Cap?" Hansen asked. "Let's get our gear and head out." "It's too nice of a day to waste it," Foster said, finishing off his coffee in one long drink. Chapter 2. Foster, Sullivan, Hansen, and Cooper stood by the front gate of the complex, 2 ladders sitting on the ground beside them. Rather than being armed with their assault rifles, which were now nearly out of ammunition, each man had a hunting shotgun with a pouch filled with shells hanging from their belts. The weapons were heavier than their standard-issue rifles, but the ammunition situation had forced the change. They'd found dozens of shotguns in the warehouse inventory, along with cases of shells. It wasn't ideal, but it would keep them in the fight. 50 yards in either direction were Thomas and Parker, who were standing beside their own ladders near the fence. The 3 positions formed a triangle of sorts, spreading out the distraction points. Both privates had their rifles ready, what little ammunition they had left reserved for emergencies. Foster clicked on his radio, the device crackling to life. "All right, Parker, Thomas, we're ready to move whenever you are," Foster said. "Copy that, Cap." "We'll get you out the door and keep working on the defenses," Parker replied, his voice tinny through the speaker. "Are you sure you guys don't need us?" Thomas asked. Foster looked at the truck waiting on the other side of the gate, then back to the warehouse. The building was secure for now, but it needed more work. The tarps Hansen had been fighting with, reinforcing the doors, setting up proper lookout positions. All of that took time and manpower. It's going to be a tight fit with 8 people at the gym. Besides, I'd rather run headlong into a group of those undead cannibals than do construction, Foster said. Both privates let out a laugh through the radio before Parker spoke. "Woodworking is my jam, Cap. Once we get some downtime, I can whip you up a nice side table," Parker said. "Pretty sure there's 20 pallets in there filled with side tables, Parker," Thomas replied. "Yeah, but where's the fun in that, Thomas?" Parker shot back. Foster shook his head, suppressing a grin. The banter was a good sign. His men were tired, but their spirits were still up. "Well, it looks like you boys have a lot to talk about while we're gone," Foster said. "All right, Cap, I got the hint. Ladders are going up now," Parker said. "Thank you, Parker," Foster replied. Sullivan walked over to the gate, peeling back the tarp half an inch. He pressed his face close to the gap, looking out to the work truck on the other side. Sullivan gasped when he saw 30 zombies swarming it, their bodies pressed against the metal, hands slapping against the windows and doors. The creatures moved with that restless energy, searching for a way inside, even though there was nothing there. Rather than back away, Sullivan kept watching as Parker and Thomas began yelling from either side at the tops of their ladders. Their voices carried across the parking lot, sharp and loud. "Hey! Over here! Come on!" In an instant, every creature near the truck took off running towards one side or the other. The horde split, some racing toward Parker's position, others toward Thomas. In a matter of seconds, the coast was clear around the truck. "Looks like we got their attention, Cap." "You're good to go," Parker said through the radio. Foster looked over to the others, giving them nods as they reached down and grabbed the ladders. The aluminum was light in their hands as they lifted them, positioning them against the chain-link fence. The ladders extended 12 feet, high enough to clear the top with room to spare. They scaled quickly, boots finding purchase on the rungs, moving with the efficiency of men who'd done this 100 times in training. At the top, they swung their legs over carefully, avoiding the posts, then dropped down into the truck bed below. The vehicle rocked slightly under their weight. Before any of the zombies could recover and come back their way, Foster and Hansen were in the cab. The captain jammed the key into the ignition, the engine roaring to life. He threw it into drive and hit the gas, tires squealing as they peeled out of the parking lot. They were a block down before the bulk of the horde took notice of them, the creatures turning at the sound of the engine. Several gave chase, their forms growing smaller in the rearview mirror. With a quick turn to the right, Foster navigated around a corner, and they were quickly out of sight. "All right, Cap, where is this place?" Hansen asked, bracing himself against the dashboard as they took another turn. "Mike said it was 1.5 miles down this street, then a left turn at Birch Street, and we'll see the strip mall on the right," Foster replied, eyes scanning the road ahead. "Sounds easy enough," Hansen said. "Let's hope so," Foster replied. The truck continued driving through the warehouse district, which didn't have much in the way of traffic. The streets were mostly empty, abandoned cars scattered here and there, but nothing blocking their path. There were small packs of ghouls roaming around, most of them trapped behind fences at the various facilities they were passing. The creatures noticed the truck, rushing to the fencing and reaching through, but unable to follow. Their moans faded as the truck moved on. Foster kept the speed moderate, maybe 40 miles per hour. Fast enough to cover ground, but slow enough that he could react if something jumped out. The industrial buildings passed by on either side, their loading docks empty and silent. They got a few more blocks up before Sullivan began banging hard on the back window, his fist hitting the glass with urgency. "Stop, Cap! Stop!" Sullivan shouted, his voice muffled but clear. Foster slammed on the brakes without hesitation, skidding the truck to a halt. The vehicle fishtailed slightly before stopping in the middle of the street. He threw open the back window, sliding it aside. "What is it, Sullivan?" Foster asked. "Back it up to that last intersection," Sullivan said, pointing behind them. Foster didn't question it, putting the truck into reverse. The transmission clunked as he backed up, checking his mirrors as he navigated backward to the previous intersection. He stopped in the middle of the street, the engine idling. Sullivan pointed to their right, his arm extended. About a block down there was a swarm of zombies, close to 30, surrounding a car on the side of the road. The vehicle was a compact sedan, its paint job barely visible under the press of bodies. The creatures were banging against it, smacking their hands on the windows and roof, trying to get inside. The glass held, but spider-webbed cracks were visible even from this distance. "It's probably just one of those things trapped inside, holding their attention," Hansen said, leaning forward to get a better look. "And what if it isn't, Sarge?" Sullivan asked. Foster and Hansen exchanged a glance, both men considering the possibilities. Hansen shrugged his shoulders, the gesture non-committal. Foster did the same, silently debating Sullivan's point. The corporal had a habit of being right about these things. "We're out here saving people, aren't we?" "What's it going to hurt to do a drive-by?" Sullivan pressed. "The man's got a point, Sergeant," Foster said. "You're driving Cap. I'm just along for the ride," Hansen replied. Foster nodded in agreement before making the turn towards the car. The truck's tires gripped the asphalt as he navigated down the side street. As he got within half a block, the engine noise drew the attention of several zombies from the pack. Their heads snapped toward the sound, and they turned and raced towards the truck with that horrible speed. Foster kept the speed low, fast enough to push through if needed, but no real risk to the truck. He wasn't trying to plow through them, just get close enough to see what they were dealing with. The first zombie reached them, slamming into the front grille with a wet thud. The creature bounced off, spinning to the pavement. Foster kept going, the truck's momentum carrying them forward. Before too long, they pulled up alongside the car, trying to look inside, but the windows were blocked by the swarm of zombies around it, bodies pressed against every surface, their hands leaving smears on the glass. "Give them a honk, see if anybody is home," Hansen suggested. Foster thought for a moment before nodding and hitting the horn. He tapped out the opening bars to shave and a haircut, the familiar rhythm echoing down the street. There was a pause, then from inside the car came the response. 2 quick honks. 2 bits. "All right, boys, we have a live one," Foster said. "Yeah, but how in the hell are we supposed to get them out?" "We'd have to burn through half our ammo," Sullivan said from the truck bed. The swarm was thick, maybe 30 creatures packed tight around the vehicle. Even with shotguns, that was a lot of shells, and noise would draw more. "There's a bunch of tools back there. See if anything might come in handy," Hansen said, turning in his seat. Sullivan and Cooper opened up the large toolbox in the truck bed, the lid creaking as it swung open. They dug around through wrenches and hammers, pushing aside coils of rope and bags of fasteners. After a moment, Cooper stood up with a large electric saw, the kind used for cutting metal. He checked the battery pack on it, seeing that it still had a charge. The indicator light showed green. "I can make this work." "Cap, back up a bit and get me closer to the car," Cooper said. Foster nodded and did as instructed, throwing the truck into reverse. He backed up slowly, checking his mirrors, then angled toward the car. He got close enough that there was only a single line of zombies crushed between the two vehicles. The creatures were pinned, unable to move, their bodies compressed. Once stopped, Cooper jumped over to the roof of the car, his boots landing with a metallic thump. He took a knee and poked his head over the edge to look inside through the windshield. There was a lone woman inside, mid-40s with shoulder-length brown hair. She had a gash on her forehead, with dried blood crusted on her face, running down past her eye. She looked up at Cooper with a mixture of fear and hope. He waved and spoke loudly, raising his voice to be heard over the moaning. "Hey ma'am, I'm going to need you to climb into the back seat and get into the floorboard. This is going to be loud and potentially dangerous," Cooper said. The woman nodded frantically and did as told, climbing over the center console with difficulty. She squeezed into the back seat and curled up on the floorboard, her arms covering her head. Once she was in position, Cooper started up the saw. The motor whined as it spun up, reaching full speed in seconds. Then he drove it into the thin roof metal, the blade biting deep. Sparks flew in a bright shower as he carved up the roof like it was a Thanksgiving turkey. The metal screamed as it separated, the saw cutting through with ease. It took a couple moments for him to cut out a rough square, maybe 3 feet on each side. He gave it a couple of firm kicks to break it free, his boot denting it inward. The metal section fell into the car with a crash. Once done, he tossed the saw back over to Sullivan, who caught it and just nodded approvingly. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Let me get that off of you," Cooper said. He suddenly remembered that there was someone in the car who might have just been hit by falling metal. Cooper dropped down through the opening, his legs hanging into the car, and reached inside. He pushed the cut metal section away from her, sliding it into the passenger footwell. The woman looked up at him, her eyes wide, but relieved to see someone there to rescue her. "Thank you so much. I thought I was going to die in here," she said, her voice shaking. "Sure thing, ma'am, but we can talk more when we're over in the truck," Cooper replied, extending his hand. "Call me Heather. All that ma'am stuff makes me feel old," she said, taking his hand. Cooper let out a laugh as he reached down and pulled her up. She was lighter than he expected, probably hadn't eaten much in the last couple days. He hauled her through the opening and onto the roof. Sullivan reached out from the truck bed and helped her across the gap, his hands gripping her arms firmly. The outstretched hands of the zombies below reached up, grasping at air, their fingers inches from her legs, but unable to grab onto her. Sullivan and Heather stepped to the side, giving Cooper room to jump. The private pushed off the car roof and landed safely in the truck bed, his knees bending to absorb the impact. "That's a hell of an eye, Corporal. Keep that up while we're out here," Foster said from the cab, looking back through the rear window. "Where are we going?" Heather asked, steadying herself against the side of the truck bed. "We have a safe spot at the Supercenter warehouse, but we have to run an errand first." Chapter 3. Foster drove the group down the street, making the turn onto the side road that would take them to their destination. The asphalt was cracked and worn, typical of the side streets in this part of town. The street was mostly empty, with only a smattering of creatures running around a few blocks down. They moved with purpose, but no clear direction. They scanned the horizon, spotting the strip mall on the next block. The back of the building was facing them, a long expanse of concrete and loading docks. It was swarming with zombies trying to get inside, their bodies pressed against the metal doors and brick walls. The creatures clawed at the surface, searching for entry points that didn't exist. "Let's hope that the front is a little less crowded," Hansen said, leaning forward to get a better view. "I'm going to circle around to it. If we drive by it, we're just going to attract attention," Foster replied. Hansen nodded as Foster made the turn on the next street, driving 2 blocks before cutting up and heading back towards the strip mall. The route took them through a residential area, houses sitting silent and abandoned on both sides. A few zombies wandered the yards, but none close enough to the street to be a problem. As they got within half a block of the strip mall, Foster stopped, giving them time to survey the situation. The engine idled quietly as they studied their target. Across the street sat the strip mall. On their right was the main building, which had a small anchor department store, along with a dozen smaller businesses that stretched on. The storefronts were a mix of restaurants, service businesses, and retail shops. To their left sat an outbuilding, which had an eyeglasses place. The small structure was maybe 30 feet square, sitting isolated in its own corner of the parking lot. Foster pulled out the phone, clicking on the number that Mike had texted him earlier. It rang a couple of times before a man answered, his voice strained. "Asher's gym," the man said. There was a pause. Then the man spoke again with urgency. "Please tell me these are the soldiers Mike told me was coming to save my ass," Asher said. "This is Captain Foster, just as Mike promised," Foster replied. "Oh, thank God," Asher breathed. Foster heard Asher put the phone to his chest, the sound muffled as he yelled out to the others about who was on the line. There were excited voices in the background, relief evident in their tones. After a moment, Asher came back on the line. "All right, Foster, how do you want to do this?" Asher asked. Foster looked down the row of businesses, studying the layout. He spotted a horde 40 strong crowded around the front of one building about halfway down the strip. The creatures were packed tight, their bodies creating a wall of undead flesh. But nowhere else along the strip showed any activity. "I'm going to go out on a limb and assume you're the business with the crowd trying to get inside?" Foster asked. "Yeah, that's us. We're open 24/7, so when this hit in the middle of the night, we were the only thing open," Asher explained. "And I'm assuming you didn't magically heal your ankle in the last hour?" Foster asked. "Shit, man. It takes a lot to put me out of commission, but this certainly did it," Asher replied with a dry laugh. "Don't worry, we're going to get you out of there." "It's just going to take a little doing," Foster said. "I would say the back door, but we kind of drew a crowd there too," Asher said. "Yeah, I saw that on the drive in," Foster confirmed. Foster kept looking at the eyeglasses outbuilding as he talked, his mind working through possibilities. The structure sat isolated, far enough from the gym that it might work. He studied the distance, the sight lines, the parking lot layout. "Asher, I know you're a tough guy, but I need you to be straight with me. If I park out front, right by the curb, how much time do you need to get to the truck?" Foster asked. "If I don't have to fight any of those people, I can be door to door in 15 seconds, Asher said without hesitation. 15 seconds. I can work with that, Foster said. "But how are you going to get those people away from the gym?" Asher asked. "I have an idea, but I'm going to need you to sit tight for a few minutes. But you be ready to go when you see me pull up," Foster said. "We'll be ready to move Foster." "Thank you," Asher said, emotion creeping into his voice. "Sure thing, Asher," Foster replied. Foster clicked the phone off, continuing to stare towards the eyeglasses building that sat 50 yards from the front of the gym. The wheels were turning, pieces falling into place. Hansen watched him for a moment before speaking. "You don't have a plan, do you, Cap?" Hansen asked. "Sure I do, Sarge. It's just not the best plan I've ever had," Foster admitted. "Well, let's hear it," Hansen said. Foster gestured toward the outbuilding as he explained. "We're going to get into that eyeglasses business, figure out some way to make a ton of noise, hope those things take the bait, load up Asher and his crew, and be back at the supercenter before lunch," Foster said. Hansen stared at the captain for a moment, his expression unreadable. Foster shrugged, knowing how it sounded. "What? I said it wasn't my best," Foster said. "Well, let's get it done already," Hansen replied. Foster nodded and put the truck into gear, leaning back to the window as they started to drive. Sullivan and Cooper were watching him expectantly. "Nobody shoot unless absolutely necessary. Sullivan, you get that door open as soon as we stop," Foster ordered. "I'll take care of it, Cap," Sullivan confirmed. They drove slowly across the road, keeping the engine noise as low as they could as they pulled into the parking lot. The truck crept forward at maybe 10 miles per hour, rolling more than driving. The men in the back kept a close eye on the zombie horde down at the gym, watching for them to break away and investigate the new sound. But they never did. The creatures remained fixated on the building, their single-minded focus working in the soldiers' favor. Foster pulled them to the front of the eyeglasses building, positioning it between them and the zombie horde. The structure would block the line of sight, keeping them hidden. He cut the engine, and everybody got out, including Heather. The woman moved stiffly, her legs cramped from sitting in the confined space. Sullivan made his way to the door, already pulling tools from his vest as the captain spoke to her. "Do me a favor, Heather, stay in the cab of the truck. We're only going to be here for a minute," Foster said. "Okay, I can do that," Heather replied, nodding. She got into the truck, sliding over to the middle seat. Her hands gripped the steering wheel nervously as the others moved over to the door. Cooper peered through the windows, his face pressed close to the glass. He looked for movement inside, scanning the darkened interior. But he found nothing. No signs of disturbance either. No overturned displays, no blood on the floor. "Nobody's home, Cap," Cooper reported. "And we're in," Sullivan announced. The lock had taken him less than 30 seconds, his tools making quick work of the mechanism. The 4 soldiers had their hunting shotguns at the ready as they breached the building. Each man swept in a different direction, their weapons tracking as they moved. They cleared the space quickly, checking behind counters and in the back room. They were relieved to find no zombies roaming about. The building was silent and empty. "Does anybody need a new pair of readers while we're here?" Cooper asked, looking at the rows of glasses on display. "I wouldn't mind a pair of those stupid expensive sunglasses," Hansen said, walking toward a display case. He looked over to Foster, who was giving him a disapproving look. The captain's expression was stern, but not angry. Hansen held up his hands in mock surrender. "Sorry, Cap," Hansen said. "Well, hurry up and get your sunglasses, Sarge. Then get to work finding something that can pull those things over here," Foster said. Hansen let out a chuckle as he moved over to the sunglasses display. He quickly scanned the selection before grabbing a pair of dark aviators and hooking them to the front of his vest. The glasses dangled there, catching the light. "So, what exactly are we looking for, Cap?" Sullivan asked, opening cabinets. "If I knew Sullivan, I'd tell you. But there's got to be something in here that can make a lot of noise," Foster replied. The men continued looking for several minutes, opening drawers and checking closets. They found lens cleaning supplies, eye charts, boxes of frames. Nothing useful. The building was surprisingly sparse when it came to equipment. "I found a grinder back there, but I don't think that's going to do the trick," Hansen called from the back room. "There's got to be something in the truck we could use. Zip tie the trigger on a saw or something and let it loose," Sullivan suggested. "That's not real high up on my list, Corporal," Foster said, shaking his head. The 3 of them continued going back and forth, bouncing ideas off each other. Meanwhile, Cooper looked up, noticing speakers that were mounted all around the showroom. Small white units in each corner, connected by visible wiring. He ignored the conversation, finding a wire and following it with his eyes. The cable ran along the ceiling, down the wall, behind picture frames. It took him behind the back desk and to a stereo system sitting on a lower shelf. "All right, we're in business," Cooper announced. "What do you have, Cooper?" Foster asked, walking over. "Stereo system. We can crank it to 11 and prop open the back door. That should do the trick," Cooper explained, pulling the unit out to examine it. "We're just going to have to move fast as hell to get out of here." "And hope they don't notice us," Hansen said, considering the logistics. "Maybe not," Sullivan said. Hansen and Foster gave the corporal a confused look, watching as he walked over to a lamp in the corner of the room. The fixture was plugged into the wall, its cord running down to the baseboard. Sullivan reached down and unplugged something else from the wall outlet, standing up holding a timer device. The small plastic box had a dial and switch, the kind used to automate lighting. "I figure they used it to cut the lights on during the weekend when they're not open. Hook it to the radio, give ourselves a few minutes to get behind some cover, then watch as those things run to the music," Sullivan said, holding up the timer. Hansen and Foster exchanged a glance, both men nodding approvingly. The plan was simple, which meant fewer things could go wrong. "I like it. Get it set up." Chapter 4. Foster sat behind the wheel of the truck, Heather sitting right beside him, as Hansen occupied the passenger seat. The 3 of them were squeezed together in the cab, shoulders pressed against each other in the tight space. They stared out towards the strip mall, waiting on their diversion to go off. The anticipation was heavy, each second stretching longer than the last. Foster hit the cell phone dial button, and a moment later, Asher's voice came through. "How are we looking, Foster?" Asher asked. "The diversion is going to be going off in a minute. As soon as we have an opening, we're going to be on the curb. Tell your people to get into the back and you get into the front seat," Foster said. "I'll have them ready," Asher confirmed. Foster didn't respond, simply hanging up and pocketing the phone. He continued his gaze across the street, waiting for the timer to trigger the radio. His hands gripped the steering wheel, ready to move at a moment's notice. He rolled down his window a bit, listening for the music. The glass squeaked as it lowered, letting in the warm desert air. Another few tense seconds ticked by before he could hear loud music coming from the store. The sound carried across the parking lot, tinny but loud. He couldn't tell exactly what it was, some inoffensive pop music. But it was working. The upbeat melody was incongruous with the death surrounding them. It took a few moments for the horde by the gym to take notice. A handful of creatures at the back of the pack turned their heads toward the new stimulus, their dead eyes tracking the sound. Then they broke away, racing towards the eyeglasses store with that horrible sprint. "Come on, that's it. Take the bait," Foster muttered. He continued saying that mantra under his breath, willing the creatures away from their target. In a matter of seconds, half of the crowd had broken away, racing towards the outbuilding. They crashed through the open back door, disappearing inside in their pursuit of the noise source. The horde was thinning, bodies peeling away in ones and twos. However, about 15 zombies remained at the gym, none of them interested in the music. Perhaps they couldn't hear it over their own moaning, or the banging on the window was keeping their attention. Whatever the reason, they weren't budging. They continued their assault on the gym's front windows, hands slapping against the glass. "Damn it," Foster said. He thought for a moment, running calculations in his head. 15 zombies, 4 shooters, close quarters. The math wasn't ideal, but it was doable. Foster leaned his head toward the open back window. "We're going to have a fight on our hands, so take them down fast," Foster called back. "They won't know what hit them, Cap," Sullivan replied. Foster nodded and hit the gas, the truck quickly picking up speed. The engine roared as he floored it, the vehicle lurching forward. They bumped up and down a bit as they crossed from the street into the driveway, the suspension protesting. The engine noise drew the attention of a couple of zombies at the back of the gym pack, their heads snapping toward the sound. "Hang on!" Foster shouted. Foster gripped the wheel tightly, his knuckles white, not wanting to risk losing control of the truck as the front grille smacked into the two creatures. The impact was brutal, metal meeting flesh and bone. Their chests caved in with audible cracks, ribs shattering, and their bodies were flung back onto the unforgiving asphalt. They hit the ground hard and didn't move. Foster slammed on the brakes in front of the gym, tires squealing. The men in the back immediately opened fire, the shotgun blasts deafening. Both Sullivan and Cooper were ruthless, pumping round after round into the heads of zombies. Blood and brain matter sprayed across the storefront windows, painting them red. The hunting shotguns were made for distance shooting, so having the target within 5 yards might as well have been point-blank range, especially for trained marksmen. The spread was tight, the damage devastating. Both men ripped through their loaded shells in a hurry, the actions of their shotguns pumping with mechanical efficiency. They were forced to reload as 5 zombies remained, their fingers fumbling for fresh shells. The ghouls ran over to the side of the truck, reaching up for the men with grasping hands. But they had no hope of actually grabbing onto them, the truck bed too high. Foster threw the truck into park before getting out, the door swinging wide. He raised his shotgun as he came around the front of the truck, his boots hitting the pavement at a run. He made the turn and got the creatures in his sights, his finger finding the trigger. The zombies were lined up shoulder to shoulder along the truck bed, making them easy targets. Foster squeezed off round after round as quickly as he could get their heads into his sights. The shotgun kicked against his shoulder with each blast. Brains splattered against the truck's paint job, and bodies dropped to the ground in heaps. As quickly as his assault began, it ended. The only sound was the idling engine and the distant pop music still playing from the eyeglasses store. Foster did a quick sweep of the ground, his shotgun tracking across the bodies, making sure none of the ghouls were moving. When he was certain they were in the clear, he let out a loud 2-finger whistle, the sharp sound cutting through the air. He pointed to the front of the gym. "Asher, get your ass in gear!" Foster shouted. A moment later, the front door to the gym was unlocked from the inside. A group of frightened people emerged, blinking in the sunlight after being trapped inside. Foster waved at them frantically to get moving, his arms sweeping in urgent motions. However, they flinched as one of the soldiers in the back of the truck fired off a shot, the blast making them freeze. "Cap! We have company!" Sullivan called out. Foster reached into the bag of shells on his hip, his fingers finding the smooth plastic casings. He reloaded as he ran around to the driver's side door of the truck, pumping the action to chamber around. He looked out to the eyeglasses building. Zombies were beginning to emerge from it, drawn by the gunfire like moths to flame. The music hadn't held them long. Without hesitation, he raised his weapon, took aim at the doorway, and put down a zombie that was rushing toward them. The creature dropped mid-stride. Foster looked back to the gym. The last two people were finally exiting, moving slower than he would have liked. They looked shell-shocked, uncertain. "Get your asses in gear," Foster shouted. Sullivan popped off another round, the shotgun blast echoing. The shot prompted the captain to raise his shotgun and take aim at the eyeglasses building again. As soon as a creature emerged from the door, he fired, putting down another zombie. The body fell backward, tripping up the one behind it. Before he could fire again, he heard groaning and pained yelling coming from the passenger side door. The sounds were sharp, anguished. He turned around to see that two people were having trouble lifting a large man into the truck. The man was huge, easily 250 pounds, and he wasn't helping much. "Sullivan, keep those things at bay," Foster ordered. He ran around to the passenger side as Sullivan continued firing, each blast buying them the precious seconds. Foster spotted Asher, who was 6 feet tall and built like a tank, but screaming like a stuck pig as his foot hit the bottom of the doorframe. His face was contorted in pain, sweat pouring down his forehead. "You two, get into the back of the truck," Foster said to the people trying to help. "I'm not leaving my man," the young woman said. Carly was nearly a foot shorter than Asher, but no less fit. Her muscles were defined, her grip strong. She struggled to lift him into the truck, forcing Foster to help out. He grabbed Asher under the arms, taking most of the weight. As the two of them worked to get him into the truck, the captain looked to the back, spotting Hansen pushing people into the truck bed. The gunshots continued, a steady rhythm of blasts. Sullivan was burning through ammunition, but keeping the horde at bay. Foster struggled to get Asher into the truck, the man's weight working against them. "Are you sticking by that 15 seconds, Asher?" Foster asked through gritted teeth. "Yeah, that might have been optimistic," Asher gasped. Finally, they managed to get the injured man into the truck, Foster slamming the door shut with his hip. Carly ran to the back, her ponytail bouncing as she moved. Hansen grabbed her arms and lifted her up into the bed with ease. Foster ran back around, jumping into the driver's seat and throwing the transmission into gear. The engine revved as he slammed on the gas, the truck picking up speed. He heard people falling around in the bed, bodies tumbling as they struggled to find handholds. "Is everybody good back there?" Foster called out. "We're fine, Cap. Just get us the hell out of here," Hansen replied. Foster drove around the lot in a tight arc, the truck's tires squealing. The zombies gave chase, their forms growing smaller in the rear-view mirror as he made his way out to the street. With a hard left turn that made the truck lean, he got back onto the road. He pressed the accelerator, speeding up to put some distance between them and the horde. The engine roared, the speedometer climbing. He made the next turn, driving down several blocks at high speed, before letting off the gas and coasting a bit. His heart was pounding, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He came to a stop in the middle of the road, where no zombies were visible. The area was clear, at least for the moment. "Is everybody all right?" Foster asked, turning in his seat. He looked into the back through the rear window, where the people were rattled but unharmed. They were breathing hard, eyes wide but intact. They gave him a smattering of thumbs up, some more confident than others. "I'm fine too, Foster," Asher said from beside him. The big man was pressed against Heather, who was squeezed between him and Foster. Asher's face was pale, his injured ankle propped up awkwardly. "I'm glad to hear that, Asher, but going forward, can you do me a favor?" Foster asked. "Anything you need?" Asher replied. "Good. Whenever I ask you for an estimate, give me the over," Foster said. He stared at Asher for a moment in a serious manner, his expression stern. Then both men broke into laughter, the tension breaking. They knew how close they had come to not making it out of there, so Asher's miscalculation hadn't cost them. A laugh was in order, a release valve for the stress. "I think I can manage that," Asher said, still chuckling. "Good. Now everybody get comfortable. We'll be back at base in just a few minutes." Chapter 5. Sullivan and Hansen had a firm grip on Asher's waist as they lowered him to the ground inside the supercenter warehouse compound. The ladder rungs dug into their hands as they took his weight. The muscle man grunted in pain as his injured foot banged against the last rung, the contact sending a jolt through his leg. He let out a string of curses, his face contorting. "Please tell me you have some pain meds somewhere in this place," Asher asked through gritted teeth. "There's a whole pharmacy section we haven't gone through yet, so there's probably something. But if we can't find anything, we did stumble across a few pallets of liquor that will definitely do the trick," Sullivan said. Asher looked at the corporal like he'd suggested drinking gasoline. His expression was pained but incredulous. "Look at me, man. Does it look like I drink?" Asher asked. Sullivan gave the toned muscle man a once-over, taking in the defined abs visible even through his shirt, the thick arms, the disciplined physique. He smirked as he spoke. "I'm betting if we don't have anything stronger than ibuprofen that you'll take it up to numb the pain," Sullivan replied. Asher thought about it for a moment, his jaw working. The contemplation seemed to make his injured ankle hurt even more, the throbbing intensifying. Defeated, he let out a sigh and nodded his head. "Yeah, whatever stops the pain in the short term," Asher admitted. "Come on, let's get you inside and see what we can do," Hansen said. The two soldiers ducked down so that Asher could put his arms around their shoulders for support. They took his weight easily, years of carrying heavy packs making this seem light by comparison. The group walked towards the office portion of the complex, moving slowly to accommodate Asher's injury. His foot dragged slightly, unable to bear any weight. As they entered the building, Foster walked in front of them, positioning himself by the barricade. The other survivors from the gym clustered nearby, looking around at their new surroundings with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Foster raised his voice to address them. "All right, everybody, let me get your attention. For those who might have missed it, I'm Captain Foster," he announced. He paused, making sure everyone was listening before continuing. "The rest of my men will introduce themselves personally, but I wanted to give you a quick lay of the land," Foster said. The survivors looked around at the soldiers, everybody giving pleasant nods to one another. Some of the tension seemed to ease from their shoulders. They were safe, at least for now. "I know you've been tuning into Midnight Mike's show, and I can confirm that pretty much everything he's broadcast is true. The military is gone, we're on our own, and it's only going to get worse out there. So, we're going to take matters into our own hands," Foster said, his voice carrying across the room. Carly stepped forward slightly, her ponytail swinging. Her brow was furrowed with concern. "What does that mean exactly?" Carly asked. "Excellent question, Carly. For the moment, we're going to continue fortifying the compound here. Some of you are going to assist in putting up tarps around the fencing, which should help in keeping the attention off of us. Others are going to help construct living quarters," Foster explained. Asher shifted his weight, wincing as he did so. His arms tightened around the soldiers supporting him. "How are we supposed to do that?" Asher asked. "We are essentially standing in the world's largest supercenter, so anything they would carry at their stores, we have multiples of here. We've just scratched the surface on the inventory, but already we've found sheds that just need to be built. There's also a variety of camping equipment, living room furniture, and even bedding. Now it's not going to be luxury living, but I'd venture a guess to say it's going to be better than the gym we just pulled you from," Foster said. The civilians looked around to one another, nodding and engaging in some small talk. Voices rose as people discussed the possibilities, the prospect of something better than where they'd been. Foster put his hands up to get them to quiet down, the gesture cutting through the noise. "All right, now a few of us are going to be coming and going, hopefully bringing more survivors into the fold. Did anybody here work as a secretary or some job that required a lot of paperwork?" Foster asked. Carly raised her hand without hesitation, her arm shooting up. "I handled all of the memberships with the gym. And the books, juice bar ordering, stuff like that," Carly said. "Perfect. For the time being, I'm putting you in charge of personnel," Foster said. Carly's eyes widened slightly. She glanced at Asher, who gave her an encouraging nod despite his pain. What does that even mean? Carly asked. It means that when we bring new people in, we need a file started on them. We're going to need to know what they can do. Do they have medical training? Are they a cook? Did they have a woodworking hobby? Anything that might be useful towards becoming a functioning community, Foster explained. Carly nodded, her expression shifting to one of focus. The responsibility seemed to ground her, giving her purpose. Got it, I can handle that, Carly said. Excellent. Thomas, get her set up with a laptop and whatever else she needs. Parker, take a few of the newcomers and start working on the fence. Cooper, take the others and get them going on putting together some sheds. Meet back here in 15 for the next excursion, Foster ordered. The soldiers responded with a crisp, "Yes, sir," before departing. Thomas moved toward Carly to get her situated. Parker and Cooper began organizing the civilians into work groups. Foster walked past them out of the building with Hanson and Sullivan right behind, the three men stepping into the bright sunlight. "Impressive speech there, Cap," Hanson said. "When it comes time to elect a mayor, you have my vote," Sullivan added. Hanson and Sullivan broke into laughter, the sound carrying across the parking lot. Foster shook his head, but there was a hint of amusement in his expression. "Are you two done?" Foster asked. "Yeah, for the moment, Mayor," Hanson replied, still grinning. Foster let out a sigh as he pulled out his cell phone, scrolling to Mike's number. He hit the call button and held it to his ear. It rang a couple of times before the DJ picked up. "This is Midnight Mike. Who am I talking to?" Mike asked, his radio voice in full effect. "It's Foster," the captain replied. "All right, Captain. Good to hear your voice again. Give me just a second because we're still live on the air. Is there anything you'd like to say to the people of Las Vegas?" Mike asked. Foster hesitated for a moment, considering his words. He wasn't used to public speaking beyond his men. "I don't really have much to share outside of 'we're fighting back,'" Foster said simply. "You heard it here, folks. Things may be dire out there, but we're not dead yet. Now sit back and rock out to this early 90s grunge hit while the captain and I have a chat. I'll be back soon," Mike announced to his listeners. The opening strums of a guitar could be heard through the phone as Mike stepped away from the microphone. Foster heard footsteps, then a door closing. The music faded to a dull background noise. "All right, Captain, give me some good news," Mike said, his tone shifting to something more casual. "We managed to get Asher and his friends out of the gym and back to the compound," Foster reported. "That is awesome to hear, Captain. Are you ready to head back out? Because I have a long list of people who are within driving distance," Mike said, enthusiasm creeping into his voice. Foster walked a few steps away from Hanson and Sullivan, lowering his voice slightly. "Mike, let me ask you something. When you're taking down names and locations, are you asking what they do for a living?" Foster asked. "I haven't been, but a few of them have volunteered that information." "Why?" Mike replied. "Because with Asher being injured, it brings up a glaring need," Foster said. There was a pause as Mike connected the dots. When he spoke again, understanding was clear in his voice. "You need a doctor, don't you?" Mike asked. "Doctor, nurse, paramedic. Hell, I'll settle for someone with a first aid merit badge at this point," Foster said. "Give me just a second. Let me see what I got," Mike said. Foster could hear papers rustling over the line, the sound of Mike flipping through his notes. The DJ was muttering to himself, scanning his database of survivors. After a moment, he spoke up again. "All right, I got one for you. However, it's a little further out than the last run," Mike said. "It is what it is, Mike. Where am I going and who am I looking for?" Foster asked. "There's a neighborhood about 4 miles away with 5 houses filled with survivors in need of rescue. Your first stop is going to be to pick up Amanda, who is a nurse," Mike explained. Foster felt a wave of relief. A nurse was exactly what they needed right now. "I can work with that," Foster said. He pulled the phone away from his ear for a moment, checking the battery. Still at 60%. "Good enough. Text me the address and let her know that we're going to be heading her way soon," Foster said. "What about the others in the neighborhood?" Mike asked. Foster thought about it for a moment, remembering how large of a crowd they had drawn at the gym. The gunfire, the horde converging on them. 4 miles was a long way to go, and a lot could happen. "Put them on standby, but tell them to stay put until we give them a signal," Foster said. "And what is that signal exactly?" Mike asked. Foster contemplated, needing something silent that wouldn't draw attention. Something simple that civilians could understand. 3 clicks of my flashlight towards their front door. If they see that, they're to run to the truck. If they don't, then they need to stay put, Foster said. I'll put the word out. Thank you, Captain, and be safe, Mike said. I appreciate it, Mike. We'll be in touch, Foster replied. The line went dead, and Foster pocketed the phone. He turned to find Hanson and Sullivan watching him expectantly. 4 miles, that's a hell of a haul, Hanson observed. Do we have a GPS charged up? Foster asked. Yeah, Cap. I have a few of them in the office ready to go, Sullivan confirmed. All right, same crew as last time. Bring a couple of the GPS units in case we need to commandeer another vehicle, Foster ordered. You got it, Cap, Sullivan said. Foster started walking back toward the building, his mind already running through scenarios. 4 miles meant more streets, more potential ambush points, more zombies. Stock up on ammo too. We're on the move in 10. Chapter 6. Foster sat behind the wheel, driving the 4 soldiers down the relatively quiet side streets in the industrial area towards the neighborhood that was just a few blocks ahead. The truck's engine hummed steadily, the sound muted compared to the roar when they were hauling at full speed. Hanson rode shotgun, one hand braced against the dashboard, while Cooper and Sullivan stood in the bed of the truck, their heads on the constant swivel. The GPS on the dash in front of them chirped, the electronic voice announcing to turn left in half a mile. The device's screen glowed blue in the shadowed interior of the cab. The streets aren't nearly as bad as I thought they would be, Hanson observed. He looked down the next side street as they crossed the intersection, spotting a handful of creatures roaming around in the parking lot of a warehouse. They wandered aimlessly, drawn by nothing in particular. No cars, wrecked or otherwise, were visible anywhere. This isn't exactly a high-traffic area, Foster replied. True, but with half the city turning overnight, it's surprising that they haven't wandered out here yet, Hanson said. Foster glanced at his sergeant, one eyebrow raised. Are you really complaining, Sarge? Foster asked. No, it just puts me at unease, as if they're hiding around the next corner, Hanson admitted. Foster's grip on the wheel tightened slightly. He'd been thinking the same thing, but hadn't wanted to voice it. Well, thanks for that nightmare fuel, Foster said. Hanson let out a chuckle as they approached the turn. The GPS chirped at them again, announcing that their destination was a mile ahead on the right. The captain leaned back to the window, giving it a knock to get the soldiers in the back's attention. Sullivan turned, leaning down to hear better. We're in the home stretch. Keep your heads on a swivel, Foster said. If we see something, we'll let you know, Sullivan confirmed. Foster nodded as he reduced his speed, easing off the accelerator. The engine noise dropped to a low rumble as they entered the neighborhood. He wanted to minimize any sound that might draw attention. The neighborhood wasn't fancy by any stretch, working-class homes that had been there for decades. The kind of place where people lived their whole lives, raised families, grew old. Some of the houses were run down, paint peeling off in long strips and roofs sagging with age and neglect. Others looked like the owners cared for them, or were just fortunate enough to have the money to maintain them. Fresh paint in neutral colors, manicured yards with trimmed hedges, but still modest-looking properties. Nothing ostentatious. They barely got a block down before 2 zombies rushed out from a side yard, emerging from behind a rusted pickup on blocks. The creatures slammed into the side of the truck with heavy thuds, their hands slapping against the metal. Foster brought the vehicle to a stop, his foot firm on the brake. Sullivan and Cooper reached down, grabbing large garden shears they had pulled from the warehouse inventory. The tools were heavy-duty, meant for trimming thick branches. Each man lined up their target, the zombies reaching up futilely, before driving the tips of the blades into the tops of the zombies' heads. The metal punched through skull with sickening cracks. The impact was forceful enough to penetrate deep, the creatures convulsing for a moment before collapsing to the pavement in heaps. We're good, Cap, Cooper reported. Foster continued driving them up the road, keeping the speed low. A few more zombies appeared, running at them from driveways and yards as they moved. Each time the captain stopped long enough for them to be silently put down by the men in the back. The shears proved effective, if brutal. Before too long, the GPS chirped at them again, the electronic voice announcing they had arrived at their destination. Keep your eyes out for movement. Shoot only if necessary, Foster ordered. You got it, Cap, Sullivan said. Foster pulled out his flashlight, aiming it at the front door of the house the GPS indicated. He clicked it on and off 3 times, the beam cutting through the afternoon air. A moment later, the door opened, and a brown-haired woman of average build stood in the entrance. Rather than come running for the truck as expected, she waved frantically for them to come to the door. Her gestures were urgent, insistent. "Oh, what in the hell is this?" Foster muttered. "What do you want to do, Foster?" Hansen asked. "What can we do besides go see what she wants?" Foster replied. He muttered curses under his breath as he leaned back to the rear window, sliding it open. "She needs our help, so we're running up there. Stay here and keep watch," Foster ordered. The soldiers in the back of the truck let out a "yes, sir" in unison as Foster and Hansen got out of the vehicle. They shut the doors gently, minimizing the noise, before running quickly across the yard. Their boots barely made sound on the grass. As they approached, Amanda stepped back, clearing the way for them to get inside the house. The interior was dim compared to the bright sunlight outside. Once she shut the door behind them, Foster began talking in a stern, displeased manner. His jaw was set, his eyes hard. "Did Mike not tell you what the signal was?" Foster asked. "He did, Captain." "Did he not tell you that I was going to need help?" Amanda replied, meeting his gaze. Foster looked over to Hansen, both men shaking their heads. Another communication breakdown, another complication. "We don't have long." "What do you need?" Foster asked, his tone clipped. "The bags in the kitchen, we need to take them," Amanda said, gesturing down the hallway. Amanda led the soldiers into the kitchen, moving quickly. 3 large medical bags sat on the floor beside the counter. They were bright orange, the kind paramedics carried. Easy to spot, regardless of what was happening around them. "They're filled with medical supplies I thought might be useful," Amanda explained. Foster shook his head, frustration evident in his expression. Every delay increased their risk. "You're risking our lives for stuff we have a warehouse full of?" Foster asked. "I'm pretty sure the supercenter doesn't carry IV bags, and some other goodies as well," Amanda replied without hesitation. Hansen's interest was piqued. He looked at the bags with new appreciation. "Why do you have IV bags?" Hansen asked. "They're technically out of date, but they're still good. I hate seeing stuff go to waste, so I try to put it to good use rather than throw it away," Amanda said. "Good enough for me. Sarge, grab a couple of bags and let's get moving," Foster said. As they picked up the bags, the weight substantial but manageable, gunshots erupted from out front. The sharp cracks echoed through the house. Each soldier slung one bag over their shoulder, the straps digging in. They left the last one for Amanda as they rushed back to the front of the house, their boots pounding on the hardwood. Hansen threw open the front door, stepping out into the yard to see Sullivan and Cooper in the back of the truck opening fire. Half a dozen zombies were swarming around the vehicle, their moans filling the air. The creatures clawed at the sides, trying to reach the men above. "What the hell are they doing?" "There's only 6 of them," Hansen said. Before Hansen could get every word out of his mouth, the 2 men in the back of the truck adjusted their aim, swinging their weapons down the street. A small swarm of ghouls rushed up to the truck, maybe 20 strong. They fired as quickly as they could pump the actions, shells ejecting, but it did little to stem the tide. For every zombie that dropped, 2 more appeared. Foster stepped out into the yard, seeing what was happening. He grabbed the sergeant by the shoulder and pulled him back toward the house, his grip firm. "Get inside and make sure the back is clear," Foster ordered. Hansen nodded and rushed back inside, as Foster raised his shotgun. He fired a single time into the horde, the blast dropping the lead zombie. The gunshot drew Sullivan's attention, who turned and noticed the captain standing in the yard. Foster began giving hand signals, his movements quick and precise. He pointed to Sullivan, then made a circling motion, then pointed to the back of the house. The message was clear: get into the truck and drive around to the back. As soon as the captain got a nod in the affirmative from Sullivan, he turned and rushed back into the house. "Hang tight, Cooper. I'm getting us out of here," Sullivan said. "What about Foster and Hansen?" Cooper asked, still firing. "We're picking them up on the way," Sullivan replied. Sullivan dropped his shotgun to the bed of the truck before diving into the cab through the open window. It took him a few seconds to get situated, his body contorting awkwardly. He spun around on the seats, legs flailing, before he slid in behind the wheel. His hand found the keys still in the ignition. Sullivan started the truck up and threw it into gear, hitting the gas and cutting the wheel sharply to the left. The vehicle bounced as they jumped the curb, the suspension protesting. The back end fishtailed as it hit the yard, dirt flying from the tires. Eventually, he got it under control, straightening the wheel and driving quickly towards the side of the house. The zombie mob followed behind, their forms growing in the rearview mirror. Sullivan made the turn to the back of the house, tires churning up grass. The captain threw open the patio door and rushed out as soon as the truck got within view, Amanda right behind him carrying her bag. Hanson emerged a second later, his rifle up and scanning. Before the corporal could come to a complete stop, zombies began swarming around the corner of the house, stumbling over lawn furniture and garden decorations. "Move your asses!" Cooper shouted. He opened fire, sending slugs flying downrange as quickly as he could rack them. The shotgun kicked against his shoulder with each blast. The bullets slammed into the chests of the lead zombies, the impacts knocking them backward. They hit the ground hard, tripping up the ones behind them in a tangle of limbs. The pileup gave the trio precious seconds to climb into the bed of the truck. Once they were safely in, Foster smacked his hand on the back of the cab forcefully, the metal ringing. "We're in! Get us the hell out of here!" Foster shouted. Sullivan hit the gas, the engine roaring. The back tires spun for a brief moment before catching traction. They lurched forward, everyone grabbing for handholds. Sullivan made the turn back to the road, the truck leaning as he took the corner too fast. As they approached the street, several more zombies rushed towards them from a neighboring yard. Sullivan had no place to turn, no room to maneuver. He gripped the wheel tightly as they approached, bracing himself. The truck slowed down a bit as the front end smacked into the ghouls, bodies flying like rag dolls. The impacts shook the vehicle. Luckily, none were pulled underneath, where they could damage the axle or get tangled in the drivetrain. The corporal got them back to the street, pausing for a moment as he looked in the rearview mirror. His eyes widened. A pack of zombies, 40 strong, was running towards them from the next block, their collective moaning audible even over the engine. "Drive, Sullivan, drive!" Chapter 7. Foster took a knee beside the back window, bracing himself against the cab. He looked through the front windshield and saw more zombies coming their way, pouring out from side streets and yards like water breaking through a dam. Sullivan was behind the wheel, keeping the speed up as they got closer to the approaching horde. The gap was closing fast, maybe 2 blocks now. "Take the next right now!" Foster shouted. Sullivan reacted as ordered, hitting the brakes and cutting the wheel hard to the right. The tires squealed in protest, rubber burning against asphalt before catching again and propelling them forward. The truck leaned heavily, threatening to tip before settling back. They drove down another block through the neighborhood, houses blurring past on either side. The 2 mobs of ghouls behind them converged into one giant horde, their combined moaning creating a wall of sound that seemed to follow them like a wave. "Where am I going, Cap?" Sullivan asked, his knuckles white on the wheel. "Keep going straight and watch yourself. I'm coming in," Foster replied. Foster lunged forward through the open window, his body contorting as he squeezed through the narrow opening. His vest caught on the window frame, forcing him to twist sideways. He did his best not to hit the corporal as Sullivan drove, keeping his elbows tucked tight against his ribs. It took a moment for him to get situated in the passenger seat, his legs tangling with the gear shift before he found space. Once in place, he grabbed the GPS from the dash, his fingers fumbling with the buttons as he clicked in their compound address. The screen flickered, then displayed the route. "What about the other people we're here to rescue?" Sullivan asked, glancing at Foster. "They're going to have to stay put for the time being." "We need to get out of here before we get overwhelmed," Foster said. The GPS chirped, the electronic voice telling them to turn right at the next intersection. The robotic tone was calm, almost absurdly so, given their situation. Sullivan glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing the horde a block behind them. The creatures were doing their best to keep pace, their forms visible as a mass of movement. Some were falling behind, but enough remained close to be a threat. The corporal cut the wheel hard to the right, while keeping his speed high. The speedometer climbed past 50. He knew they needed to lose the mob before they got back to base, which was still a few miles away. However, as they came around the corner, he was forced to slam on the brakes. A wreck sat just ahead of them, blocking most of the street. 3 cars tangled together in a mess of twisted metal and shattered glass. The tires skidded on the asphalt, leaving black marks as the three people in the back slid forward in the bed. They scrambled for handholds, bodies slamming against the back of the cab with heavy thuds. Amanda let out a cry of pain as her shoulder hit metal. Despite his quick reaction time, the front end of the truck smacked into the back end of one of the wrecked vehicles with a crunch of metal meeting metal. The impact jolted everyone forward. Luckily, it wasn't forceful enough to cause any serious damage. No steam rising from the hood. "Are you good, Sullivan?" Foster asked, checking the corporal. "Yeah, I'm good, Cap," Sullivan replied, shaking his head to clear it. His ears were ringing slightly from the impact, but everything seemed to work. He rolled his shoulders, testing for injury. "Good. Then get us the hell out of here," Foster said. Sullivan popped the truck into reverse, hitting the gas. The transmission whined as he accelerated backward, but he quickly switched over to the brakes as the horde of 60 creatures came around the corner behind them. The mass of bodies filled the street from curb to curb, a wall of undead flesh. Within seconds, they were swarming the truck, reaching up for the people in the back. Their fingers grasped at air, inches short of grabbing flesh. The moaning was deafening now, dozens of voices crying out in hunger. "I'm going to push through them," Sullivan said, his hand on the gear shift. Foster looked back, seeing zombies swarming them from behind, their faces pressed against the back window, dead eyes staring at him. Then he turned forward to get a better look at the wreck. It was a 3-car pileup, vehicles tangled together. The front end of their truck was pressed up against the rear of a sedan that had T-boned a pickup. The sedan was at an angle, blocking most of the street. Beyond it, he could see clear road. "No, just put it in drive and floor it," Foster ordered. "Are you sure?" Sullivan asked, doubt creeping into his voice. "Yeah, this thing is powerful enough to push that car out of the way like it's a toy, and we don't have to worry about any of those things getting caught under the wheels," Foster explained. Sullivan nodded and shifted into drive, his hand steady despite the pressure. Then he floored it, pressing the accelerator to the floor. The engine roared, the sound echoing off the nearby houses. The back tires pushed forward with everything they could muster, rubber squealing. The transmission strained under the load, the whole truck shuddering. It took a moment before they began moving, the wrecked sedan slowly being pushed out of the way. Metal scraped against metal, a screech that set teeth on edge. Sparks flew where the vehicles ground together. The trio in the truck bed continued laying flat, pressed against the metal floor. The surface was cold and ribbed, uncomfortable but safe. They looked up at the swarm of zombie hands reaching out over the sides, dozens of grasping fingers searching for prey. The creatures moaned, the sound deafening this close. Their breath carried the stench of rot and decay. "Just stay low and you'll be all right," Hansen said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. Amanda was too scared to speak, her breathing rapid and shallow, her whole body shook with adrenaline and fear. Instead, she nodded as she reached over and grabbed onto the sergeant's arm, burying her head into his shoulder. Her fingers dug in tight enough to leave marks through his sleeve. "Come on, Sullivan, get us out of here," Hansen muttered. He continued muttering under his breath as they inched forward. The truck groaned under the strain, pushing hundreds of pounds of wrecked vehicle. The engine temperature gauge started climbing, the needle moving toward the red. It took nearly a solid minute before the sedan was fully moved out of the way, scraped aside enough to create a gap. The paint was stripped where they'd pushed, metal showing through. Once free, the truck quickly picked up speed, racing down the street and leaving the horde in the dust. The zombies gave chase but fell behind rapidly, their forms shrinking in the rearview mirror. Sullivan took the next few turns, weaving through the neighborhood while still heading in the right direction. Foster was all for it, letting the corporal use his judgment. The kid had good instincts. However, the GPS chirped at every turn, the electronic voice scolding them for not going the correct way. The device kept trying to reroute, insisting they turn around. Foster reached over and muted it, the constant corrections more annoying than helpful. They made it a mile down the road, getting back into the warehouse district before stopping. The industrial area was quieter, more open space between buildings. They looked all around, only spotting a handful of creatures wandering in the distance. A couple of them began running their way, but posed no real threat at this distance. They were maybe 100 yards out. "Is everybody all right back there?" Foster called out, turning in his seat. We're a little bruised up from the sudden stop, but other than that, we're good, Cap, Cooper replied. He was rubbing his ribs where they'd hit the cab, but nothing felt broken, just sore. Amanda, what about you? Foster asked. Physically, I'm fine. Mentally? Amanda trailed off. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The soldiers began nodding in agreement, understanding exactly what she meant. The adrenaline crash was hitting all of them, leaving them shaky and exhausted. The reality of how close they'd come to dying was sinking in. Preaching to the choir, ma'am. Preaching to the choir, Hanson said. Sullivan shifted in his seat, looking back at Foster through the rear window. So what now, Cap? We're out here. Do you want to head back to the neighborhood? I mean, we pulled so many of them out we might have a clear shot, Sullivan suggested. His voice carried hope, the desire to complete the mission, to not leave people behind. Foster thought about it for a moment, weighing the options. The logical part of his brain wanted to agree, to use the opportunity they'd created, but the part that had kept him alive through multiple deployments was screaming at him to retreat. Then he shook his head, the decision made. I think we've pressed our luck enough for one day, don't you think? Foster said. You want to give up already, Cap? Sullivan asked, disappointment evident in his tone. We're not giving up, just punting until tomorrow, Foster clarified. Foster's right, Sullivan. We've had a hell of a couple of days, and this war isn't going to be won anytime soon, Hanson added from the truck bed. Sullivan nodded, accepting the logic. The disappointment faded, replaced by understanding. But before he could hit the gas, Cooper called out from the back. Hey guys, does that look right to you? Cooper asked, pointing. He was staring down the street, where 3 zombies were visible in the distance. 2 of them were sprinting towards the truck with that frightening speed, their arms pumping as they ran. However, one wasn't running. Rather, it was shambling slowly, moving at maybe a quarter of the speed. Its movements were jerky, uncoordinated. Sullivan, drive down that way, Foster ordered. The corporal did as instructed, driving down towards the slower-moving zombie. He paused in the middle of the road as the 2 runners got within striking distance. Cooper and Hanson made quick work of them with the gardening shears, the blades punching through skulls with wet crunches. The creatures dropped without ceremony, their bodies hitting the pavement hard. Sullivan drove up another block before stopping 20 yards from the remaining creature. It looked like a factory worker, dirty coveralls with blood staining the fabric in dark patches. However, it didn't appear to have any other injuries except for the bite marks on its neck and arms. The wounds were crusted over, dried blood flaking off. Its gait was unsteady, lurching rather than sprinting. Each step seemed to take effort. Maybe it broke its leg, Sullivan suggested. The group continued staring at the ghoul, searching for signs of injury. They looked for anything resembling a break, a twisted ankle, damage to its legs. However, they couldn't see anything physically wrong with the creature's lower body. Its legs moved just slowly. It just moved as if its muscles weren't responding properly, like a machine running low on power. Could these things really be slowing down, Cap? Cooper asked. The implications of that question hung in the air. If the zombies were degrading, if their bodies were breaking down from the constant strain, it changed everything. I don't know, Cooper, but by God, let's hope so, Foster replied. You should ask Mike when you call in, Hanson suggested. It'll be the first thing I ask him. If this isn't an isolated case and these things start breaking down, we might just have to sit tight for a couple of days for the odds to shift in our favor, Foster said. Hanson raised an eyebrow, a slight smirk crossing his face. He couldn't resist. It's still 6 of us against nearly 2 million of those things, Cap, Hanson pointed out. Damn, Sarge, I wouldn't have pegged you for being an English major. Fine, a shift towards our favor, not in our favor, Foster said, unable to suppress a grin. Amanda spoke up from the truck bed, her voice steadier now that they had stopped moving. The fear was fading, replaced by something more analytical. Well, I was a math major before changing to nursing. If you're out here rescuing people like me, by my count you should have more than 6 fighting these things by now, Amanda said. Foster turned in his seat to look at her properly. She had a point, one he'd been thinking about, but hadn't fully articulated yet. They had survivors, but survivors weren't soldiers. Being in the same compound and actively fighting these things aren't the same, but you do bring up an excellent point. If we're going to win this war, we're going to need people who can fight, Chapter 8. Captain Foster climbed over the front gate of their compound, his boots finding purchase on the chain link. He looked down at the zombies surrounding the truck below, the last one to get over to safety. The creatures pressed against the vehicle, their moans creating a constant background noise. He studied them for a long moment, trying to get a sense if any of them were slowing down. His eyes tracked from one to the next, watching their movements. Virtually all of the ghouls moved with that feverish intensity that they had carried ever since the outbreak had begun. They clawed at the truck with relentless energy, their movements sharp and aggressive. However, he noticed one zombie near the back that wasn't moving quite as fast as the others. Its motions were slightly off, a half step behind the rest. "Hey, Sullivan, do you have anything I can throw?" Foster called down. The corporal looked around on the ground, scanning the parking lot. He spotted a small rock near the base of the fence, grabbing it and tossing it up to the captain. The stone arced through the air, Foster catching it easily. "Will this work?" Sullivan asked. "Let's find out," Foster replied. Foster pulled his arm back, getting a feel for the weight. Then he let the rock fly over the heads of the zombies, specifically aimed towards the one he suspected of being slow. The stone sailed through the air and clattered against the pavement behind the horde. As soon as the rock hit, half a dozen creatures turned and ran over to the source of the noise, drawn by the sound like moths to flame. The zombie he was intently focused on turned as well, and moved quickly over to investigate. However, it had a hitch in its step, something off about its gait. It wasn't physically injured as far as the captain could tell from this distance, no visible breaks or wounds. But it looked like something internally was wrong, as if the mechanics weren't functioning properly. "What is it, Cap?" Sullivan asked, shielding his eyes from the sun as he looked up. "I think we have another slow one, but it might just be my eyes playing tricks on me," Foster admitted. The distance made it hard to be certain, and he didn't want to get anyone's hopes up based on a hunch. But something was definitely different about that zombie. "Before I take watch this evening, I'll see if I can find some stuff to throw. Put those things through their paces," Sullivan offered. "Just make sure we don't have a use for it." "I don't want to waste stuff unless absolutely necessary," Foster said. They had supplies now, but that didn't mean they should be careless with them. Everything had value in this new world. "I won't go crazy, I promise, Cap," Sullivan assured him. Foster climbed down into the compound, his boots hitting the ground with a solid thud. He walked towards the building along with the others, the group moving with the easy exhaustion of people who'd survived another close call. Amanda walked beside Hanson, her medical bag still slung over her shoulder. "Do you have a place I can set up a makeshift medical bay?" Amanda asked. "We have anything you might want. We can build you a shed, put you up a tent, or we can give you your own office," Hanson replied, gesturing toward the warehouse. Amanda's eyebrows rose at the mention of an office. A small smile crossed her face. "I've never had my own office before," Amanda said. She contemplated for a moment, clearly tempted by the offer. Then she shook her head, practical considerations winning out. "I think a tent with a couple of beds might be best for now," Amanda decided. "I'll make it happen." "While I get that set up, you can check out your first patient," Hanson said. "I'm not even here 30 seconds and I already have a patient?" "What's wrong with him?" Amanda asked. "We're pretty sure it's a broken ankle," Hanson explained. Amanda winced at that. Broken bones were difficult to treat even in a hospital setting. Out here, with limited supplies and no X-ray machine, it would be a challenge. "I doubt I'll be able to fix it, but I'm happy to look," Amanda said. "That's all we can ask," Hanson replied. As they got to the doors, Foster stopped, motioning for them to keep going. The others filed past him into the building, their voices fading as they moved inside. Hanson and Sullivan paused, looking back. "Hanson, Sullivan, can you get our new guest set up? I'm going to give Mike a call," Foster said. "Sure thing, Cap," Sullivan confirmed. Foster snapped his fingers as another thought occurred to him. "Oh, and check with Carly, see if she found anybody in the group who was a chef." "I think we could all use a nice meal this evening," Foster added. "I'm pretty sure I saw some steaks in the refrigerator section when I was doing inventory," Cooper chimed in from the doorway. He'd been checking out the cold storage earlier, cataloging what they had while it was still good. The sight of all that meat had been making his mouth water. "Don't you think we should save those for a special occasion, Cooper?" Foster asked. "We still have power, so I consider that pretty special. Because if and when that goes, those stakes aren't going to be far behind. Seems like a crime against humanity to let ribeyes go to waste, Cooper replied. Foster thought about it for a moment, considering the logic. Cooper was right. The power could go at any time, and when it did, all that meat would spoil. Better to use it while they could. He nodded in agreement. That's a hell of a point there, Private. Steak it is then, Foster said. The group nodded and walked inside, leaving the captain alone in the parking lot. The sun was starting its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Foster pulled out the phone, dialing the radio station. It rang twice before Mike picked up. "This is Midnight Mike," the DJ answered, his voice carrying that familiar radio smoothness. "Mike, it's Foster," the captain said. "Rock on, Captain." "How did the neighborhood raid go?" Mike asked, anticipation in his tone. "Well, we got the nurse, but we were swarmed. Everybody else is going to have to wait a little while," Foster explained. There was a pause on the line, Mike processing the information. "They're going to be disappointed, but I have no doubt that they'll understand," Mike said. "If you wouldn't mind spreading the word to them," Foster said. "Of course, Foster. You're out there risking your neck, and I'm sitting here in an air-conditioned office. It's the least I can do," Mike replied. "I appreciate it, Mike," Foster said. "So what's next?" "What can I do for you?" Mike asked. "I'm glad you asked because I have a couple of requests," Foster began. He thought about it for a moment, mentally organizing his list before adjusting his answer. "Make that 3 things because I have a song I've been dying to hear." Foster trailed off. He shook his head at his own word choice before continuing. "Yeah, that's probably the wrong choice of words," Foster admitted. "I wasn't going to say anything," Mike replied, amusement evident in his voice. Both men let out a laugh, the dark humor a necessary release valve. When things got this bad, you either laughed or you broke down. After a moment, the conversation continued. "So first off, we are in desperate need of fighters," Foster said. "What about the people from the gym?" Mike asked. It was a logical question. A gym full of people should have yielded some capable bodies. But Foster had already assessed them. Most of them look like they're barely fit enough to run a 5K, and Asher has a broken ankle, so he's a liability at this point, Foster explained. Fitness and fighting ability were 2 different things. You could be in great shape and still freeze up when a zombie was trying to eat your face. "Understood. I can put out a general call over the air, see what I can get in response." "Are you looking for anything in particular?" Mike asked. "At this point, I'll take anybody." "Ex-military, bouncer, hell. I'll take someone that gets into bar fights," Foster said. He needed people who could keep their heads when things went bad. People who'd already proven they could handle violence. "I'll make it happen." "What else, Captain?" Mike prompted. "This one is a little strange." Foster trailed off. Mike picked up on the hesitation immediately. "Stranger than a zombie apocalypse?" Mike asked. "So, that's what we're calling it now?" Foster replied. "I forget you aren't listening to the show. We did a full hour-long block on it last night talking about what to call this. Zombie Apocalypse won out," Mike explained. "I always liked those movies growing up, not so much now," Foster said. "Tell me about it," Mike agreed. Foster took a breath, gathering his thoughts before dropping what might be important news. "Well, to put it in zombie terms, I think the runners might be turning into shamblers," Foster said. "What? Are you serious?" Mike asked, his voice rising with excitement. "Don't get too excited, at least not yet. We found one on the way back to the compound that didn't look like it was injured, and it was moving a lot slower than the rest. Like its muscles or tendons had snapped in its legs," Foster explained. "Oh, I will definitely put that info out there. I'm sure most of my listeners are staying as far away from the windows as possible. I'll get them looking, keeping tabs on these assholes, see if we can't spot any of them slowing down," Mike said. The DJ was already thinking ahead, mobilizing his network of listeners. Information was power, and the more data they could gather, the better. "I appreciate that, Mike," Foster said. "Absolutely, Foster." "So are you and your boys down for the night?" Mike asked. "Yeah, there's just a couple hours of daylight left, and we have some newcomers we have to figure out what to do with. Plus, we're breaking out the grills and cooking up some steaks," Foster replied. "You're killing me over here, Foster." "I'm having ramen noodles for the 9th straight meal," Mike said, his voice carrying genuine distress. "9th straight meal? This thing has only been going on for 2 days now," Foster said. Yeah, well, I was a lazy cook before all this went down, Mike admitted. Foster let out a laugh, the image of the DJ surviving on instant noodles while coordinating a citywide resistance somehow fitting. Well, Mike, I'll be sure to keep a steak set to the side for you, Foster promised. I'll take a six-pack or two if you have extras, Mike added hopefully. With everything you're doing for us, Mike, you'll have your own case, Foster said. The man deserved it. Without Mike's radio network, they'd be operating blind. I can't wait, Foster. In the meantime, I'll put the word out and get the people working for us, Mike said. I'll be in touch, Mike. Stay safe, Foster said. You too, Foster, Mike replied. The phone cut out, Foster pocketing it as he stood basking in the sun. He let the warmth wash over him, soaking it in. He closed his eyes for a moment, knowing how fortunate he was to have a zombie-free space to stand in. How many people in the city could say the same? All right, another day down, one day closer to taking this city back. The end.